So I was born and raised here in Houston, and my grandmother's house was a safe haven because everything wasn't right at my home. My mom was hooked on drugs. My dad was an alcoholic. And at about 13, that's when life kind of flipped upside down. My dad left, and instead of me being focused on school, I started focusing on the streets, and it cost me over 10 years of my life in prison. I started selling drugs at the age of 13 and made it a career. The first time I went to prison I was 20 years old. It was for assault on a police officer. When I went in prison, my mentality was if I didn't obey the law on the outside, why should I obey the law in prison? So just like I was a homeland terrorist, I was a terrorist in prison. And I spent a lot of my time in close custody, line 3. I had to do my entire sentence. And so I kind of did it how I wanted to do it. My mindset was, how do I find out who has what? Just kind of built myself up to be a better criminal. My grandmother always, she sung worship songs over me. I knew she was a believer, so I heard about Jesus. My mom and dad, they professed that they were believers. We didn't live it, I really felt that I needed Jesus in my life, but I didn't know anything about discipleship, and I was going back to the same neighborhood, same environment, and so, I didn't start walking with the Lord until I was 33. I was facing 25 years to life as a habitual criminal. I didn't have a bond, so there was no way I could pay my way out. And one of my worst fears happened. The chaplain came and spoke with me, and he told me my grandmother was in ICU, and nothing prepared me for that. Prison wasn't something that broke me, and so my heart was hardened. Anything that life could have thrown at me, I felt like I experienced that in my household. So I was numb to a lot of things that happened in life. And when the chaplain came and talked to me, being that it wasn't my first rodeo, I knew that if you don't request to speak to a chaplain, someone's either dying or someone's in really bad shape. And so when he told me my grandmother, I broke. When I went to make the phone call, he actually told me, he said, "This may be your last phone call to your grandmother." And so I go into his office and I make the phone call, and my grandmother used to sing a song to me when I was a little boy, and it was Jesus on the Main Line. And it's Jesus on the main line, tell him what you want. Jesus on the main line, tell him what you want. Jesus on the main line, tell him what you want. You just call him up and tell him what you want. And so when I would get in trouble, I would tell my grandmother, like, "Mama, I need you to get on the main line for me." And the main line was a line of prayer. And because I felt in my heart that God would definitely listen to my grandmother, and he didn't want to hear anything I had to say. And so I told my grandmother, and she couldn't respond. She had tubes in her nose and in her mouth, but my entire family was there because she was literally the backbone of our family. And I told my grandmother, I said, "Mama, all these years I've asked you to get on the main line for me. Now I have to get on the main line for you." And it's like the Lord spoke to my heart. I knew he wouldn't heal her on this side of heaven's gates. And so I prayed for my grandmother, and we were all in tears. And my grandmother, she wrote that she loved me. And I left that phone call going away knowing that I was at a crossroads in my faith. Either I was going to follow God fully, or I wasn't going to believe anything that I had heard about Jesus, and I was just going to totally be a criminal for the rest of my life. But it was me going back to my cell, and I'm in the aggravated tank where, people are facing big time, and so the officer saw me in tears, and he said, "Hey man, you want me to put you in another cell?" And I told him, I said, "No man, everybody has a grandmother. And if they didn't have one, they'll understand." I'd love to say I surrendered right then and there, but it took me about 7 days. And I wept and I cried, and it reminded me of, David, because I cried for 7 days. I actually cried until I didn't have any more tears to cry. I had to put water in my eyes to keep them open and keep them from burning. But it was it was just the thought of, I got a chance to spend 33 years with my grandmother. And there's so many children in the world that don't never get to have the memories that I had with my grandmother. And so it was like my heart went from being angry at God to being grateful to God, because I had so many years to spend with my grandmother, and I knew her, and I knew she loved me. She loved me in spite of. She would always challenge me to do better. Like, son, you're so smart. I don't know why you keep giving the prison system all your years. Do something different with your life. And so all the things she had told me was just on replay those 7 days that I was thinking about her. I really felt like Joseph. I felt like the Lord ordered my steps. He gave me favor with officers. I went from a horrible inmate to a model inmate, and I lived out my faith behind the walls. And actually, when I landed on my first unit, the chaplain came to me and he said, hey, there's a program, and he said it's a discipleship program, and it's 18 months. He said, before you say yes, just know there's classes from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. He said, you'll be 30 minutes outside of Houston. And I told him, I said that, that's what I've been missing all these years, is discipleship. And there were so many different volunteers, and that's actually how I met Dave Trickett and Charm. Is by them coming in and building a relationship. And when I got out, I had so many tickets. I had tickets in so many different counties, and I had to pay all those tickets off before I could get a driver's license. And I love Dave because a lot of that he pocketed out of his own pocket. What was different is right before I paroled out, the Lord put it on my heart to do something different. And I knew exactly what that meant. And I was like, Lord, that's such a bad idea. Like, I'm an ex-drug dealer. Like, you want to send me to a halfway house that's usually drug infested? I'm going back and forth with the Lord, and he's like, no, you need to do something different. And I was like, Lord, there's one place that I'll go, and that's Charm. And I wrote Dave again, and I told him, I said, brother, I really feel that I'm being obedient by asking to come to a halfway house, because I have somewhere to go, but it's definitely not conducive to my transition back into society. I said, but I don't need a handout. I need a hand up. And he just wrote me back, and I got an acceptance letter. And I was like, praise God. And so when I came home this time, it was totally different. The Lord, he really used Charm I had everything. I had more than what I needed. I mean, clothes, I had food. I didn't have to worry about a cell phone. And for the first 30 days, anyone who comes to Home to Charm, like, they just want you to just focus on you and your walk with Christ. And so in that 30 days, I had a lot of alone time still to deal with myself and get before the Lord and process some things about the new me. Coming home to Charm, it was such a blessing. The house was nicer than anything I had ever stayed in. It was really like the Lord had went before me, and like I said, I had everything I needed. I get to go into prisons now and kind of be a light to the guys and let them know there is hope on this side of the prison walls, and that you can walk out your faith and live a better life. Life's not over. It's actually just beginning. I've been home now 11 years, been a member of my church for 11 years. I was ordained by the church, and so ordained minister there. My father, when I was ordained at the church, he actually came to my ordination, and that was the last day he took a drink. Cold turkey, over 50 years of drinking. Not only did his last day he took a drink, but the last day he quit smoking cigarettes. And now, the same father who didn't want anything to do with me texts me every morning and tells me how much he loved me and how proud of me he is. My mom, who was once on drugs, I was able to baptize her March 8th, 2020. I've been truly blessed. I'm wrapping up my undergrad, and I was just accepted to Dallas Theological Seminary for their THM program. I have 8 grandkids, so that definitely keeps me busy, and I'm very active in their lives. And we love serving. We love serving in our church. I've been teaching in blended family now, coming up on, it'll be 6 years in April. We love it. We love the people that we walk alongside of. And just to let them know, it's no such thing as a second-class Christian, because there's no such thing as a first-class Christian. Life is so much bigger than your present circumstances, and God is a way maker. If you focus on Him and not your circumstances, and understand that, life can be hard, but God has such a bigger plan if you allow Him to take that pain and use it for His glory. one of the scriptures that really changed my life was, when my mother and father forsake me, the Lord will lift me up. His ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. If you trust him and trust his plan for your life versus, being so caught up in situations and circumstances, just allow him to lead you. He'll never lead you wrong, and he'll never lead you astray. And so you can trust him. And even when you can't see his hand, you can trust his character. He's faithful in the valley. He's faithful on the mountaintop. He's faithful in the chaos. He's Lord over the chaos. Even when we're in the storm, we can keep our eyes on Jesus.